Oopsie. All right, let's go. Three, two, one. Guess who's back? It's your guys from myfantasysportstalk.com. Brandon Reed, Dan Shaw, hosting another episode of My Fantasy Podcast. You didn't think we were going away, did you? I mean, that may be what you thought. We've been on a little bit of hiatus, summertime hit and things going on, pool parties and holidays and festivities and a little bit of a break in sports action, to be honest with you. Nothing's going on except baseball, and while my man Dan Shaw is okay with that, it's kind of a slow period for me. World Cup's been keeping me going, but you probably have just been watching baseball and not even keeping up with this World Cup, though, Dan? So, man, good to see you, though. Good to be back with you on another podcast. We got a lot to cover today. Big news today.
Yeah, well, I think another reason why we maybe haven't had a podcast is we've been putting so much work into our fantasy football draft guide, which has now been released. So I think we're gonna talk about that in a little bit. But I'm watching baseball. I couldn't tell you anything about really the World Cup going on. Astros in first place, keep winning, 7-game win streak. So I've been soaking up baseball, fantasy baseball, which we're actually going to touch on. Our boy Nick Pertins dropped us a line, kind of calling us all out, it sounded like. But I'm confident, champ's champ. We're going to have a champ on later in coming up in our next episode, Ryan Thomas of the Thomas Take. But we all know that Dan is the reigning champ of our fantasy league. So, how does that make you feel, Brandon? Good?
I can't really talk because I just got through playing Nick and Judy Pertins, and it didn't go so well. It just didn't go so well. They stuck it to me one day. 4th of July, actually, they scored like 230 points on the 4th of July, so that was hard to overcome. But we'll talk about that again. An upcoming episode of My Fantasy Podcast, we're going to have all that. So do not miss that. Look for that coming out in this next several days. But we're going to have Ryan Thomas on that podcast. He wants to talk about UFC and Brock Lesnar. Also wants to talk about the LaShawn McCoy story going on that surfaced over the last couple of days. And we did get called out by Nick and Judy Pertins over some fantasy baseball, so we'll take a look at those standings and see what's going on there. But that is in the next episode. We're already planning it out, so stay tuned. Another episode of My Fantasy Podcast coming up real soon. But today, just wanted to stop by real quick and talk to you guys about the new MFST, the inaugural episode, the very first edition ever of the MyFantasySportsTalk.com fantasy football guide for 2018. And as soon as you said it, Dan, I realized, yes, that's really the key component to why we haven't been on the air lately with the podcast, because you have been grinding it out. Not only is this an 80-page fact-filled, just analyst field guide for your fantasy football drafts coming up, or if you've already had one, sorry that you missed it, but you need to study this material. But not only that, you've been learning a new publishing software. So much going on. The Dan Chalk has been buried and busy.
I mean, I'm really proud of what we've put out there. I authored, I guess you would say, a lot of the content in the guide, and we self-published it at My Fantasy Sports Talk. I built the site from the ground up 4 years ago. We hit our 4-year anniversary on the 4th of July at MFST. So I built that from scratch, and now we built this guide from scratch. It's not your typical guide. It's what I like about it is it's a PDF format, so you can just download it on any mobile device, computer, and you can have it saved on that. So during draft time you can look it up, or if you really want to, kill some trees, print it out. That doesn't bother me too much, but you have that ability as well. But like you said, 80 pages of fantasy football information. We got a lot of the MFST writers to cover teams. We covered all 32 teams, team previews, giving you specific players to look at and target, as well as the rookies that might make an impact on those teams as well. So there's a lot of information. besides covering all the teams, I put out rankings for every position and strength of schedule, which is something that I look at quite a bit, but I don't think it gets brought up enough. So we go strength of schedule per position: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. So when you're drafting, what team, how their schedule kind of ranks against that position that you're drafting. So a lot of good material in there. I'm proud of it. It took a long time. It hours of work, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. And I'm finally giving my tips out to the masses, not to tout myself too much, but I am a member of the Fantasy Sports Writers Association, and at My Fantasy Sports Talk, we deliver a lot of great fantasy content year round. So this is a way to kind of get that jam-packed for your summer fantasy football drafts.
You're also reigning and defending fantasy football champion of the MyFantasySportsTalk.com Fantasy League. You've won one of the 2 years, so you got to be pretty proud of that, to win one of 2 years.
Championship game both years. But that makes us even more proud of the My Fantasy podcast duo that we have right here, because I won last year. I am the reigning champ. But Brandon, give yourself a little pat on the back. You did shock the world the first year, and you took home the title. So props to you there. We have 2 fantasy experts on the show.
I just wanted to win the first one. My name will ever be etched in the histories of MyFantasySportsTalk.com as the first ever champion. So now I just kind of took a step back. I felt bad. Dan created this whole thing from scratch, like he said. So I'm like, okay, I gotta let him get his too. So that's kind of, I just backed off a little bit last year, and let him have his glory. But all bets are off now. So if it's not you or myself, Orlando needs to step up to the plate, I guess, and do better. Just do better. So we got to keep this thing in house, though, right? We're going to try to anyway.
Yeah, Orlando's probably going to have to get booted if he doesn't make the postseason this year in the Fantasy Football League. It's just it's strength, something of the fittest. What's that saying?
Survival of the fittest.
Yeah, it's that, and Orlando does not have that. That's why he's not even on the show right now. So, Orlando, sorry, man. Booted if you don't make the postseason. That's one of the rule changes that are going into effect, a few. But yeah, you agree?
Well, while you're saying that, I'm kind of curious as to why you booted Susan Bianco, because she won the baseball league last year. So it's kind of that opposite effect. Like, you did a little too good. You're out of our league.
She disappeared. Nobody's heard from her. So, Susan, where are you?
Just basking in the glory. She took her winnings and hit the islands, so can't be mad there. But hey, guys, the fantasy football guide, so much information there. It's really all I need. You can take the analysis for what it's worth. You may have differing opinions, but it's really, like Dan said, a lot of different writers contributed to all the different teams. All 32 teams are represented here in the guide, so you can take away some information about every single team. A lot of good information. Like I said, it's really all I need. 80 pages. But the thing is, like Dan said, it's downloadable PDF format. It's very easy. Downloads in about 4 seconds, depending on your internet connection at home. For Ryan Thomas, it may take 17 seconds or so with his technical difficulties he usually has, but no more than 30 seconds tops. You're going to have this 80-page guide downloaded, and it's just $1. You cannot beat it. But if you don't really want to if you're not really looking to dish out your money to help support us at MyFantasySportsTalk.com, that's fine. We're not asking for that. Dan, where are these proceeds going?
Yeah, so at My Fantasy Sports Talk, we've kind of built a loyal following. We've done pretty well for ourselves. I'm proud of where we've gone in the 4 years. Getting those first few viewers every day and readers was something that I looked at and I loved. But watching that grow to literally thousands, when we've hit 75,000 readers and viewers per month at My Fantasy. So we wanted to give back with the hopes of this $1 draft guide. We wanted to put that money out there and give back to the community. So we're donating 100% of the proceeds to two great charities: the Wounded Warrior Project, which obviously helps support the veterans who have been wounded overseas or in battle or anything like that. And then the second, which kind of hits close to home for me, is the Susan G. Komen Foundation, which deals with breast cancer awareness and hoping one day that we'll be able to cure breast cancer and all cancers. But that one hits home to me personally because my mom, when I was young, I was 7 years old when she was diagnosed with breast cancer. So I went through that, and now I'm happy to say that, you know, she's a survivor of almost 20 years. So both of these charities impact so many people each day. And, you know, if we can take $1 of all the work that we put in for this draft guide to give back and give to these two causes, fills my heart. And towards the end of the book, I actually wrote a piece just thanking each and every one of our buyers of this guide from the bottom of my heart. You know how much it means to us here at MFSD, and how much it's going to mean to the actual people that reap the rewards and benefits of these charities. So it's definitely something I'm proud of.
So yet another thing we have in common, Dan, that I didn't even know until you just told me that. But not only are we very knowledgeable about sports, fantasy sports, very good at podcasting, very, very good looking, you know, and very charming. But both of our moms actually had a bout of cancer. So my mom as well, over the past 5-6 years, has gone through it twice and has beat it both times. Hopefully, you know, things are going to be fine. But just the continue awareness and just funding, you know, to great causes like this. Is why you decided, and you're the one that decided on the where the proceeds go, the charitable donations. So, man, good job with that, man. So I'm just curious, do you even have a status to how many people have purchased the guide so far? Would you even be willing to say at this point?
Yeah, we have kept tally. Sales have been slow a little bit to start off. I think a lot of because we are still in July. It's probably not smart to do your draft now. I mean, Brandon harps on this constantly on the podcast, but we have sold. It's between 30 and 50 copies is where we're at right now. My goal for the book for the season is 1,000 copies. I want to be able to give $500 to each of those and kind of make it rewarding for them. But that's the goal for the site, for the guide. And I believe we can get there. Here's the thing, not to say, you know, MFST is better than any other guide that you're get this easy. $1 I think is a good value for all this information, but I see some guys going, you know, the printed out ones $8 to $13, but now I've seen some digital copies that are going for $27, $28. You can't beat it. You can't beat it, Brandon.
Oh. You froze up on me a little bit there, so I may be a little bit behind catching up with you, but no, you cannot beat it. And those numbers actually surprised me a little bit because it's only been just a few days that since it's been published. And like you said, it's also the middle of July, or pretty close. We're sitting right about the middle of July, so still very early to be thinking about your fantasy drafts. Hopefully, if you're doing things right. But so that's actually encouraging news. That kind of shows you just a piece of the loyal fan base that we have at myfantasysportstalk.com to get all of those purchases out already. 30 to 50 is really good numbers there. And so as of now, Dan, the plan is to push this out and publish it eventually on Amazon. But as of right now, myfantasysportstalk.com, that's where you would direct the traffic to go to the article on the website and purchase it right off the website.
Yep, you can get it right on the website. Go to our Facebook page. We have a strong following on Facebook. It's pinned to the top of the page. So just go there, click the link, and right in that article, you can buy the magazine. It downloads, like you said, within seconds, and then you have that 80 pages of information. And Brandon, I don't know if you caught the article that I wrote in there, but draft day tips. Don't go stealing my tips now for our draft. So that was something I was a little concerned with putting out there.
Too late now.
Yeah, that is true, but a lot of good information in there. A lot of just separate articles. You got sleepers, you got busts. I made crazy predictions, so my 50 things that maybe could possibly happen that I write every year on the website is always a big hit. So I did a little short 5 bold predictions in the piece. Lamar Jackson is one of them. Watch out for him. That's a little sneak peek.
Josh Gordon is also one that you've already got a little feedback on.
We've gotten a lot of feedback on the cover, which says our Josh Gordon on there, Flash Gordon, and why he is a top 3 wide receiver in fantasy. And we've received more mail on that specifically than anything else. So we've gotten killed for it. Well, I've gotten killed for it, but it's going to happen.
So we're also going to touch on that on the very next podcast. So stay tuned for that because we had to address it. So just skimming through the table of contents real quick, though, Dan, just kind of let everyone at home know exactly what you're getting in these 80 pages. But we start out with some QB rankings, running back rankings, wide receiver, tight end rankings. Then you talk about the strength of schedules. You have broke down the quarterback's strength of schedules, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, all their strength of schedules based on their schedule each and every week. Also, you brought out the rookie rankings, ranking the rookies, running back handcuffs, which is important. Breakout or bust, which I found that really interesting. Your bold predictions, draft day tips, as you just mentioned. You also threw in some defensive and kicker rankings, and don't forget about the defenses and kickers. All the NFL team previews, that took up a big chunk of the guide right there. You take a look at the bye weeks, sleepers. You have some late round draft targets, which is very key right there. Then you talk about the charities, of course, and you also have a very apropos section here of buyer beware, and it happens to be LeSean McCoy, and this was written before the latest drama of LeSean McCoy's saga. So there you go. So I don't know. You were like a Nostradamus there, Dan. Now I think that buyer beware, and you may need to add an edit to that and add to that.
That piece is looking good for me right now. I obviously didn't predict legal trouble for McCoy, but there's a lot of other factors why you just really shouldn't draft him. So stay away, read the piece, buy it, and you'll find out why.
And then you can meet the guys at MFST. I really recommend going to page, this is 74. God dog, that's a good looking dude on page 74 there. But anyway, it's all in the guide. You must buy the guide. Hey, $1, and I promise you won't regret it. There's so much fantasy information here. Literally, it's overwhelming, breaking down every single team. And I think all the writers did a really good job breaking down the teams, Dan. And we got nice, consistent coverage for each and every single team in the NFL.
Yeah, and we keep talking about our next show, but Ryan Thomas, he's a regular guest on the podcast. He writes the way he talks, and it's nonstop. So that's why the Bills are just – but my dad bought the guy, just a little quick story. My dad bought the guy, and he was like, Dan, I really liked it. There's a lot of great content in there. I'm going to beat you in fantasy this year. Why is there so many Bills articles? And he's a Bills fan. He's like, why was the Bills one so long? And Ryan Thomas is to thank for that. But he hits on a lot of great points. He touches on McCoy's handcuff and some other great stuff. But, yeah, every team is covered. One thing that he didn't say, which is actually true, who's just as long as the Bills, was the Titans, which is done by yours truly there, Brandon Reed, who brought out a lot of great breaking down every one of the skill position players you're going to dream. And I thoroughly enjoyed reading all of the other writers' takes, and heck, I like reading mine as well.
It all came together beautifully. That's all I can tell you. It's all in the guide. So check out the website. Check out our Facebook page, the MyFantasySportsTalk.com 2018 Fantasy Football Guide. You will not regret it. Proceeds go to the Wounded Warrior Project and Susan G. Komen. So thanks for checking in with us, guys. Check out the next podcast, which will be coming out in the next few days, and we'll start breaking down some of this stuff with Ryan Thomas as well. So until then, For Dan Schalk, I'm Brandon Reed. See you next time, Podcast Peeps. Peace. Good enough?
Yeah. I was probably freezing.
Yeah, you were. So I was afraid I may have got behind, and so there may be some a few seconds of silence there. You were freezing.
Okay.
So I don't know how the end product will come out. It may be perfect. You never know. You never can tell what's being recorded. Was I freezing?
Well, it seemed like my computer froze. Like I don't. Before like the show, I closed out Word and it was that not responding. So then I Task Manager killed it. So I don't know if that affected it. But it seemed like my computer was frozen. So yeah, I mean you did freeze, but I think it was more on my end than it was yours.
Yeah, you definitely froze, but I don't think it was too critical or too crucial. For the most part, we were pretty much, conversing with each other pretty fluidly.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna send him the link.
Yeah, go ahead and bring that fool in. Get this done so I can turn this AC back on. Man, that's not bad, man. Not if 30 to 50 people bought it already. Man, that's
it was at 27 last night, and then we got a few more throughout the day, but I haven't tallied it up since last night. But yeah,
it's not too bad. I just don't think, man. Probably a lot of people aren't even thinking about it right now.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and the boost is tough, like because I figured Facebook would bring a lot of it to it. But the cover is so high in text proportion, it says, that it won't run to everybody. So I think that's going to hurt a little bit. Those stupid formatting things that I just don't know.
What up, dude?
Oh boy, I'm excited. I've been waiting for this all day. It's good to be back.
I see you did a pre-podcast for the podcast.
What's that?
You did a pre-podcast for the podcast just to let everybody know you're going to be podcasting.
Yeah, this is official, and I wanted it to be even more official. So I got to say, though, you guys, sorry for the technical difficulties that I've had in the past. The last show that I was
on. Don't apologize till we know they're over.
Right.
What is it, Dan? Stuff your sorries in a sack.
Yeah.
But I'm ready. I'm ready to rock. That's for sure.
Good. All right. So I guess we'll open and let you talk about, we'll just kind of do a little quick introduction and let you talk about the article first, with the Brock and DC potential fight and everything going on there first. Just kind of open it up, say whatever you want to say, and then we'll get into the questions 1, 2, 3 in order.
Okay. So, did you want me to just start right out of the gate?
Yeah, but I'll tell you when to go.
Okay.
Hold on there, cowboy.
I'm anxious. I'm ready. I'm pumped.
You'll know
it's
when
like
it's
I'm on Brock Lesnar steroids over here.
You'll know. Okay, let's restart it. All right, back. 3, 2, 1. What's up? We promised you another podcast coming soon, and we are not going to disappoint you. Appreciate all you guys for checking out the last quick podcast, just kind of going over the MFST Fantasy Football Guide. We appreciate all you guys for purchasing that. Just $1. We continue spreading the word that you can get all that fantasy football information for just $1, and all those proceeds going to the Wounded Warrior Project and Susan G. Komen. So appreciate that. But we told you we're going to have Ryan Thomas on, going to talk some UFC, going to talk some Buffalo Bills. So he cannot wait. This dude did a pre-podcast to tell everybody he's going to be podcasting with a My Fantasy podcast. So welcome. I'm glad he's back, Dan. There's no telling how long this one's going to go or what this dude might say. Strap in, Dan. It's going to be a Buffalo Bills talk, a lot of it.
Don't worry, Brandon. I did take my Xanax before coming on the show, so I can handle it. Good. I'm just going to lay back for a little bit, probably, and I'll just listen. And that's what I recommend the viewers to do as well, because
Pop Xanax.
You might need. Ryan's coming in hot. It's taking over.
Coming in hot. When have I ever not come in hot? That's the question.
Dan, don't put your head too far back. You might just pass the hell out completely. But anyway, what we really want to talk about today is UFC news after the DC. How do you pronounce this guy's name? Ryan Stipe Miocic.
Stipe Miocic. He's Croatian. Yeah, it's a very common Croatian last name, actually, Miocic.
So he was the champ. Just got his belt taken from DC, Daniel Cormier, this past Saturday night, and that led to a confrontation in the ring between Brock Lesnar, the WWE current champion, and Daniel Cormier, which I thought was totally fabricated. But anyway, it's caused a lot of controversy. So, and you also wrote a piece on it. So that's what's going on in the UFC right now. So take it from there. You're ready.
So, the piece that I wanted to write, being that I've had this podcast, my podcast, the Thomas Take Sports podcast, I've covered mixed martial arts and football and baseball and hockey mostly. But really, when I started it started out as an MMA podcast, and everybody kind of wanted my reaction to the DC Brock Lesnar altercation, if you will, in the octagon. And I thought, why not put pen to paper, so to speak, or fingers to keyboard, and lay out the reasons why I think this fight is in all honesty, the right fight to make right now. And honestly, why I feel it's not only just the right fight, but why Brock actually deserves this opportunity. Most people look at the UFC right now and they say, well, this guy doesn't deserve a title shot. This guy doesn't deserve a title shot. And they forgot to really realize that this UFC era, unlike any other, is the entertainment era of the sport. The UFC is a pay-per-view business. That's the business model that they followed for the last, 15, 20, 25 years. They're in their 25th year now. And they've had a lot of problems with selling pay-per-views. And whether people like to hear this or not, Brock Lesnar sells pay-per-views. And furthermore, it's not as if, they say, oh, Brock Lesnar, he stepped inside the octagon. He doesn't belong in there. He's a WWE guy. Before Brock Lesnar was a WWE superstar, he was one of the best NCAA wrestlers of all time. With the likes of Cael Sanderson, John Smith, Dan Gable, Brock Lesnar is one of the best heavyweight NCAA wrestlers ever, along with Daniel Cormier. So for all the hardcore NCAA wrestling fans out there, this is a mega match or fight between two of the best NCAA wrestlers ever in Daniel Cormier and Brock Lesnar.
But do you think it's going to be, is it going to be a pay-per-view worthy fight? I know the hype is there, but Brock's going to be damn near 42 years of age. He just turned 41 Thursday of this past week. Oh, I mean,
well, I can tell you that Daniel Cormier has a lot of other guys that he could fight, but nobody is in the shape physically, whether it was, hard-earned or not, that Brock Lesnar is in. And furthermore, people kind of question whether or not Brock Lesnar is an adequate challenger. The guy was the former UFC heavyweight champ. He became the heavyweight champ in his third fight against Randy Couture, who was the UFC heavyweight champion at one point, and as well as the UFC light heavyweight champion, much like Daniel Cormier was. So Brock Lesnar,
long time ago. Long time ago.
Right, but it did happen, and we can't say that, Brock Lesnar's CM Punk. He deserves more respect than that, I would say.
Oh yeah, I agree. CM Punk was out of his element. Yeah, no, CM Punk was out of his element. CM Punk was trying to live a dream. He should have stuck to
coming back.
WWE.
Isn't he fighting again soon?
He shouldn't.
And another thing I want to chime in on with Brock Lesnar, there's a guy out there by the name of Bo Jackson. I don't know if many people have heard of him, but one of the people that, one of the main guys that you wonder what if Bo Jackson didn't have that leg injury? What if he could have continued his football career and his baseball career? What would have happened? I could honestly say that there's so many what ifs with Brock Lesnar. What if Brock Lesnar joined the UFC prior to being in the WWE? What if the UFC was bigger than it is now then? What if it was at the point that it is now back then, and Brock Lesnar would have went from the NCAA to the UFC then? We could be talking about one of the best UFC fighters of all time. And I'm not mincing words when I say that in the slightest. His wrestling offense still to this day is second to none in that heavyweight division.
So let me propose this to you. This is straight from one of our viewers. This comes from Todd Force. Why would the UFC want Brock back? He's a steroid-popping wrestler who isn't even good at MMA. So there's a question for you.
So the UFC doesn't want Brock back. The UFC needs Brock to come back. There's a difference. They have had time and time again pay-per-views that are not selling. This past one, Miocic and Daniel Cormier, is trending over 400,000 pay-per-view buys. In the history of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, they've had 226 pay-per-view events, and they have had 15 out of 226 generate over 1 million pay-per-view buys. 5 of those 15 featured Brock Lesnar. So that's all you need to know. As far as it being it's a pay-per-view business, whether he deserves heavyweight after not winning a fight in 8 years is a completely separate debate. And it's one that I'm willing to, definitely listen to. But it's a pay-per-view business. They are really lacking pay-per-view, draws right now. And when I wrote the article, I laid out each draw that they have. Conor McGregor, we don't know when he's coming back. John Jones is battling USADA in court. He's actually battling the same man that took down Lance Armstrong. So there's a lot of red tape there that's got to be cut through for John Jones. Max Holloway is going to be out for a while. He has post-concussion symptoms that who knows when he's going to be coming back. So the UFC, as I said in the headline, desperate times calls for desperate measures. Enter Brock Lesnar.
So that's, I guess, my thing is, when are the fans going to wake up? Like, why were people continuing to buy Floyd Mayweather pay-per-views? Are you crazy? Especially at $100 a pop. What's wrong with you? You know the outcome. You know you're not going to get your entertainment value out of that. So my thing with Brock is this is all hype. I don't care. And now you're a very passionate UFC fan. I am not. I'm semi-casual at best.
Right.
But Brock is going to be 40, damn near 42 when the fight happens. He's 5-3, I believe, his overall UFC record, period. He's only fought once in 7 years. Hasn't won a fight before that, I think. So I don't see what the draw is. To me, I would say Daniel Cormier would knock him out within the first 2 rounds.
In terms of fight competitiveness, which is what you're referring to, there's a who knows, really, because in MMA, there's been times where I've thought, oh, this guy is definitely going to beat the other. Case in point, Matt Serra was fighting GSP. GSP was young. He was the face of the UFC. Matt Serra had just come off of a show in which he literally had to earn his way back into the UFC, and he won via knockout. Mixed martial arts is one of those sports where, unlike football, where you have positions and, quarterbacks, this quarterback's better than the other quarterback, Tom Brady versus Joe Flacco, usually we know who's going to have the better game. In MMA, there is no way of knowing what is going to happen until it happens. And that's why I love it so much.
It's very true. There definitely is an element of that to the UFC. I just don't see it happening. I just think
I don't see it either. I don't see it either.
It happens. I think I don't think on, like you said, on a competitive level, Brock is going to be ready for DC.
Right.
But here's the alternative to that, Ryan. I would be all for a Brock return to UFC because I'm so sick of him being the WWE champion. I am more of a wrestling fan than a UFC fan, although not much really lately.
Right.
I haven't even watched wrestling at all really in the last going on 2 years probably, really since Brock Lesnar started holding the belt. Now, do you realize how many pay-per-views that Brock Lesnar has wrestled in the WWE? He had the belt, like I think he just recently broke CM Punk's streak of the longest reigning title holder. But he only wrestled in like 4 pay-per-views in like a 3-year period. It's ridiculous.
Well, if you're sorry to interrupt you, but I just had to squeeze this one in because I was about to tell you that. If you're a big WWE fan, there's a reason why Brock is going back to the UFC and leaving the WWE. It's rumored, that who knows if this will come to fruition, but it's rumored that he's going to drop his belt to Roman Reigns at SummerSlam. And the reason why he's willing to give his belt up to Roman Reigns as opposed to another wrestler is because they've had a long-stemmed beef that has lasted over the better part of 15 years, and that guy is Bobby Lashley. He will not drop his belt to Bobby Lashley, which is what Vince McMahon wanted. From everything I've heard, said that Vince McMahon wanted Bobby Lashley to beat Brock Lesnar for the title, and Brock said, no, I will give it up to Roman Reigns and leave before that happens.
Yeah,
that's a fun tidbit there.
That is interesting, and I mean, I don't know. That would be interesting. And Bobby Lashley needs to work on his mic skills. He's been in the game a long time, and I just don't know that Bobby Lashley's the guy. I'm surprised Vince would take that angle, honestly, because I like Bobby Lashley in the ring. He's very impressive, physically, impressive, but his mic skills are horrible. He's not the one you want out there talking on the mic every single night.
He needs a Paul Heyman.
No, definitely. I mean, but even Brock can do better than Bobby Lashley.
Right.
But here's my thing is, and why I pretty much abandoned wrestling. If anybody's watching, wrestling fans, Vince McMahon, if you're happen to be checking out My Fantasy Podcast, which I know you do probably every time we're on. The reason I turn my back on your sport is basically because of the Brock Lesnar situation. I know he's a big draw. You played this up as a feature attraction when he first came out. He's only going to wrestle like once every 3 months. Well, that is stupid. You cannot have your champion not ever on the show. Your championship belt better be on Monday night, every single Monday night. That is so stupid. You can't have your champion. Folks forget what the belt even looks like because your champion is never there. What happened to the days when the belt was defended every other Monday night or at least once a month on the Monday night show, but at least have your champion involved? Could you imagine that back in the days of The Rock and Stone Cold and even back to Hogan? I mean, your champion was always on the show, and it's not the case anymore. It's a part-time champion, which is ridiculous to me. So that's why I'd be all for you, Brian. If you want to go pursue UFC again, drop that belt. Please do, and let's get back to wrestling in WWE.
Another dynamic of the DC Brock fight is that Daniel Cormier has had a tumultuous career. You wouldn't notice it by his record. He's 21-1-1, but his greatest rival is John Jones, who's put him through proverbial hell trying to, get a true fair shot at beating John Jones, with John Jones clean, not on anything at all. Daniel Cormier has tried 2 times. He's lost 1 fight. He lost a second fight, but it was later ruled a no contest. DC, I look at it as DC versus Brock is not about Brock deserving it. It's about DC deserving a chance to get paid, and it's probably going to be the easiest night of work that he's ever had. And that's really why I think the fight is happening. DC deserves a chance to get paid as the light heavyweight and heavyweight champ. And really the problem that they have as well is that their light heavyweight champ and their heavyweight champ is not only the same person, but Daniel Cormier is not a draw to the pay-per-view audience. I don't know why. He just doesn't draw. So hopefully Brock helps him in that department.
It's definitely about them pay-per-view buys. You definitely hit it on the head right there, because you could tell everyone is right in the middle of that. Dana White was right in the middle of that. It was such a staged confrontation the other night. Daniel Cormier knew the push was coming. That was so staged and fabricated that it was comical, like WWE, as you mentioned in the article. So that article is up on MyFantasySportsTalk.com right now. Daniel Cormier versus Brock Lesnar. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Check it out. So let's move on and answer a couple more fantasy questions. Bring Dan back in here because I think he's been silent. Dan, is he there?
Dan
wants CM Punk to come back again.
Yeah. Hey, we're gonna have him on as a guest. CM Punk.
Combination of Xanax, UFC, and WWE will put Dan the hell asleep. We know that now. So no surprise there. But let's bring him back in. This one's for him. So this is from our buddy, Nick Pertins. Hope Judy's doing okay. They're going to be expecting soon. Love the draft guide, fellas. You know the Pertins got to show you support. Bad news for you, Dan. All your secrets are out. Bet you Brandon and Orlando are going to keep a copy under their bed to absorb all that info. Oh, and P.S. How's looking up at me in the standings, boys? He's referring to our fantasy baseball league. Looks like I'll be the daddy to more than just my unborn child. Real question, though. Why do you have Josh Gordon ranked so damn high? And do Brandon and Orlando agree? From Nick Pertins. This is for you, Dan. You go answer all the questions. Let me just say first, though, as far as our fantasy baseball league, what is the standings right now? But I alluded to this in the previous podcast, Dan. You saw our matchup. Nick and Judy +1 did beat yours truly in a hell of a dogfight last week in the fantasy baseball league. So he probably is the number 2 seed behind Jason Weeks right now. Just a little fantasy baseball update.
Yeah, yep. And I'm holding down that 3 spot, so don't you worry.
Am I not even in it anymore? I'm not even in it anymore, am I?
I don't think so.
Okay,
but there's still time.
Okay, quick note for Nick, because me and Dan talked about this behind closed doors. He doesn't think Jason Weeks is serious, Dan. Dan doesn't, that is, Nick. But I was thinking about this today. Dan, why isn't Jason Weeks serious? You tell me the reason you're giving me.
His team isn't that good. That's basically, if you look at his schedule, he's got easy matchups. He doesn't get points against. I've scored almost 1,000 more points than him.
You have, and I'm number 2 in points. Doesn't really mean anything, but your weak schedule is what I wanted to get to. Damn, Dan, he's 13-1. He's played everybody. The weak schedule argument is null and void anymore.
The weak schedule is based on his opponents scoring against him. If you look at his points against, it's probably like half a bowl of soup. There's nothing.
13-1. He's played 14 folks, beat 13 of them. Hey, it takes some luck sometimes.
Well, I think I'm taking him on next week, so the showdown's on, bro.
And there you go, Jason Weeks. Be on the lookout, number 1 seed, champ, buddy. All right, so answer the Josh Gordon part of Nick's question.
Because Josh Gordon's a freak of nature and he's not on drugs anymore, basically, is the reasoning. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen I'm not too much for off-season pictures or being in the best shape of your life, but Josh Gordon is right now. He's working out nonstop. He's been able to finally kick the habit of all the habits that he had, and he's dedicated his life to football. You can't really look at last season. He played in barely 5 games, didn't really understand or know the offense, and was just getting back into football shape. Now that he's available, and the Cleveland Browns offense, as much as I hated on Tyrod Taylor, the Buffalo Bills quarterback the last few years, I'm all for Tyrod Taylor this year. I think with the weapons on the outside that he has, Jarvis Landry, Josh Gordon, do not sleep on Antonio Callaway, a rookie wide receiver that the Browns drafted. He was a first-round talent drafted in the 4th round. But the skill position players that the Browns have is going to be able to single cover. You're not going to be able to double cover Josh Gordon. He's going to be single covered all game long, and Tyrod Taylor's going to be able to get the ball to him. Not only that, but the Browns have a solid running game. Carlos Hyde, Duke Johnson. I'm not a huge fan of Nick Chubb, but he's there as well. So I like the Browns offense to be dangerous this year. And when you look at when Josh Gordon is healthy and on the football field, you have to go back a ways, but his numbers, 87 catches, almost 1,700 yards, speak for itself. That's top 3 wide receiver in fantasy football. He averages 18 yards a catch every single year. So he's always going to be that deep play threat in fantasy. You usually get bonuses for large scoring touchdowns, 40 or 50 yards plus. He's going to get that this year, and I'm confident in Josh Gordon. And not only that, but he's a top 3 receiver that you don't have to draft like one. He can be had in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, and he's going to perform as a wide receiver 1 on your team.
Okay, so I'm not going to answer for Orlando. He had a prior commitment and can't be here today. So I'll just speak for myself. And am I that high on Josh Gordon, Nick? No. Dan quickly forgot that Tyrod Taylor doesn't pass the ball. I mean, how many times we went through? Ryan can attest to this. He doesn't pass the ball, and he's going to be the starter for at least half the season, if not the whole season in Cleveland. If Baker Mayfield does come in by chance, he's going to be a turnover machine, I believe. And I feel for Josh Gordon. If he was on another team, maybe, but the dude hasn't really played much at all in 4 years. I do agree that he's a weapon. He's definitely a weapon. He has raw skill, but with a combination of Tyrod Taylor being at quarterback and this dude being shaken off really a non-active 4-year period of rust, I just don't see it happening. Not a top 3. But I do agree with what Dan just said, is that he could be had in later rounds and definitely be productive on your fantasy team. So I kind of feel for Josh Gordon that if he was in a different situation, then maybe I would consider going as high as Dan is, but I can't go as high as a top 3 guy when Tyrod is your quarterback.
Let me just say something before you go to Ryan Thomas and he goes off. There's another reason that I didn't, and his name is Hugh Jackson. He's a quarterback whisperer. He's going to be able to do what the Bills could not do with Tyrod, and that's actually to get him to throw the ball downfield. It's going to happen. And look at when you point to Tyrod Taylor as a deficiency to Josh Gordon, those numbers where he had 1,700 yards receiving, it was Brandon Weeden throwing him the football. So he doesn't need an all-star quarterback in order to succeed, and Tyrod Taylor is better than Brandon Weeden. And add in Hugh Jackson, the QB whisperer, boom, success value pick. Okay.
Quarterback whisperer, huh? What?
QB whisperer.
Not if Tyrod Taylor is like this.
It's Hugh Caesar Milan Jackson.
Okay.
Whoa. Let's slow it down
bash on Hugh Jackson. So let me go to Ryan Thomas right here, because you've seen the story play out. Is Tyrod Taylor capable of making Josh Gordon a number or a top 3 receiver this year?
Can we swear on here? Or? No, I'm just kidding.
I'll believe it. Say what I want to hear.
Hell no.
Straight from the heart.
No. Push the red button that says hell no on it. If there was one here, I would push it. As far as Tyrod Taylor goes, everything that Dan said outside of the Tyrod Taylor stuff was right. Josh Gordon is athletic. He's talented. He's finally, hopefully, God willing, I'm hoping that he's clean. For his sake, I'm hoping that he's clean. Hugh Jackson, I've always felt like has gotten a bad rap as a head coach, but you can't teach a man that is scared, a man that plays scared. You can't change the hesitance that he had to throw the ball, not just over a span of 1 year, not just last season, the season prior to that, and the season prior to that. The one thing I'll always say about Tyrod Taylor, and I'll say it again right now, he was the backup to Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco's been begging to get benched, and Tyrod Taylor couldn't get above him on the quarterback depth chart with decent coaches on that Ravens team that went to the Super Bowl. It's very tough for me to give Tyrod any credit when he is still. It's like a bad breakup between him and the Bills. He can't get over his playing experience in Buffalo. I haven't watched one interview in which Tyrod Taylor hasn't mentioned Buffalo. If it's happened, send me the clip. I'll be happy to watch it. But the last 5 interviews that I've seen of Tyrod Taylor, he is bitter about his end in Buffalo. And he has nobody to blame but himself.
Well, I'm not even 100% convinced that he is the quarterback to last the whole year in Cleveland. I'm not even sure he's the solidified number 1 guy on the depth chart as of now. I think that's still yet to play out. Now, would it be me? Yes, I would ride with Tyrod the whole season. But I'm not convinced that the Browns are going to do that. Who the hell knows? So, man, there's a lot of work to put Josh Gordon top 3. I like some of the raw stuff. If he was on a different team, then I would probably say yeah, but I don't know.
I think Josh Gordon's a top 10 fantasy wide receiver. Might even break into the top 5, but it won't, because Tyrod Taylor just has this revelation of the season all of a sudden and finally learns how to throw the ball 250 yards a game. He could have Jerry Rice, T.O., Randy Moss. Doesn't matter. There's a real fear in his game, and it will be shown again, and it's why he's going to get benched. I've said it before, and like I said, I'll say it again. The number on his jersey is the amount of weeks he's going to play with the Cleveland Browns. And then Cleveland has to brace themselves for the disaster that's going to be Baker Mayfield.
I will agree with that. Baker Mayfield will be a disaster, but Tyrod's going to start all 16 games. Hugh's going to go with him. He knows Mayfield's not ready.
If he starts all 16 games, Hugh Jackson won't have a job, and Hugh Jackson needs to save his job.
Well, I respectfully disagree. I think Tyrod's not that he's going to bring the Browns to the playoffs, but I think he's going to have his best statistical season of his career this year. And if you look at it, that's not very difficult to do. He's terrible in Buffalo, but I would blame more of last year on Rick Dennison than I would Tyrod Taylor, and one of the reasons why Dennison is gone too. Peace out.
I'd say it's 50-50. I did write that.
Jackson's got an all-off season with him. He knows what he wants. They traded a third-round pick for him. They know, or third or second.
I think Buffalo got the better end of that deal. That third-round pick they used to get Tremaine Edmonds. So I'd rather have Edmonds than Tyrod Taylor.
If it's not there, it's not there, Dan. Like Ryan said, you play scared, you play scared. So I don't know. I'm looking
at the draft guide.
Yeah, no, and then that's exactly what I'm looking at, because I'm going to tell you a few guys that Dan put Josh Gordon ahead of. Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham, Julio Jones, Mike Evans, A.J. Green. We'll stop there. But one I've kind of just explain this one to me, Dan. Why the hell you got Keenan Allen so high? Maybe Keenan Allen should have been on the cover.
Through, I believe it was weeks 5 through 16 last year, Keenan Allen was the #1 fantasy wide receiver in all of fantasy football. When healthy, he's legit.
Yeah, I like Keenan Allen. I don't mind that at all.
But he will break your heart along with something else on his body. That's just the pattern.
It's possible.
I'm done. It's possible. I'm done. I cannot invest into guys like that.
Should have invested into him last year because he played all 16 games and he was phenomenal.
Which means he's due. No disrespect. Not to wish ill upon him. Because I do like him, but I can't do it.
You know what? I want to say this too. I want to end the Tyrods. I wish Tyrod well. I hope it works out for him. I hope he has a career resurgence year, because this is his last stop. This is it. If it doesn't happen now, it's never going to happen.
So let's keep the Buffalo Bills theme going on here. Thanks, Nick, for the question. Good to hear from you again. Hope everything is going well. We'll talk to you soon, bud. So the last question comes from Jasper Covington. Say LaShawn McCoy is suspended. What do the Bills do at running back? DeMarco Murray? Because Chris Overy, I know it's Ivory, is downright terrible. From Jasper Covington. So what's the plan, Stan? AKA Ryan, for a backup there. And you were talking on your pre-podcast leading up to this podcast, talking about handcuffs. Dan talks about handcuffs in the fantasy football guide. So as of now, what's your handcuff looking like?
The handcuff, understanding who the handcuff truly is a huge advantage going into a fantasy draft. If you see someone take LaShawn McCoy in the 3rd or 4th, 5th round, even though he's suspended, we don't know the full details on that yet.
Yeah, so let's start right there. Let's back up. Talk about the whole story first, because more details either came out late yesterday or today about the whole, no, it wasn't LaShawn McCoy who physically actually did this, but didn't he kind of do it?
There's a lot of red tape, as I alluded to. Okay, so I was actually in the midst of shopping yesterday. I'm going to the Nike store, getting some fresh kicks, as they say. And my buddy texted me and said, "Oh boy." And I was like, "What? What's going on?" And I had heard that there was something that was going to come out about LaShawn McCoy. I thought it was that he might be, hurt or something like that. I had no idea that what would happen. The news that would drop would be from, apparently, I don't know the details. I'm just kind of paraphrasing on what I've seen and read. His girlfriend's friend posted a picture of his ex-girlfriend. On the left, she was, she looked, pristine. She looked fairly good. On the right picture, she looked like she had, definitely experienced some sort of violence, obviously.
Ran over by a truck.
Right. So now what has come out, outside of the paragraph in which her friend said, LaShawn McCoy did this. He bragged about it to his friends. He has, abused his child. All these accusations are being thrown at LeSean McCoy. And what really was released today, actually, by this woman's attorneys is that LeSean McCoy orchestrated some sort of a robbery to get his stuff back from her house, jewelry that was at her house that was his, or jewelry that he bought for her over the years. And it led to this physical altercation. If that is true, and I want to let this be known right out of the gate, if that is all true, LeSean McCoy will be released by the Buffalo Bills. There's no doubt about it. This Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott regime is nothing like the regimes of years past. They will not put up with anything in regards to this. Whether he gets suspended or whatever happens, he could get suspended for 6 games. Buffalo will cut him.
He should have the Ray Rice treatment, right? He probably shouldn't play another game in the NFL. Ray Rice was pretty much, sent out of the league, period.
Right. It's tough to compare, and I even thought that too, but it's tough to compare because that was a completely different situation, and Roger Goodell showed that he was truly gutless in that situation, in my opinion. That was the first instance of many where Roger Goodell showed that he was quite gutless. But outside of that, LeSean McCoy, I agree. I mean, if this is proven to be true, it's a big if, but there's a lot of stuff coming out now. If this is proven to be true, McCoy will get cut by the Bills, probably never play it down again. And Buffalo would then have to see what's next. And that's what I've talked about in the draft guide. As far as the handcuff, there's a guy on the Bills roster right now that not that many people know about. He had very sparing, he played sparingly last season. He actually only played in 1 game. He had 8 carries. And his name is Marcus Murphy. Out of Mizzou, he was one of the best kick returners, played sparingly at running back, but he played in the final week of the season for McCoy. McCoy was hurt. He steps in, and I honestly didn't notice a difference. I really didn't. And I know that's high praise. It's crazy. But Chris Ivory, Dan wasn't a fan of that signing, and I agreed with him. He's older. He's slower. He's taken a lot of punishment based on the style of running back that he is.
He's a journeyman now. He doesn't really have a value enough for teams to keep him around.
Right. There's no long-term value, and maybe they go out and get a veteran. But Marcus Murphy, man, I'm high on him. I know that he prepares. He's worked really hard. He worked from being one of the scrappy practice squad players to actually starting at running back for the Buffalo Bills. Granted, they had injuries, but that means that the Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane had the confidence in him to play, and he played pretty well.
So, Dan, what do you think about the whole story itself surrounding LeSean McCoy, what you heard, and what do you think should happen?
Yeah, from what I've heard, it does not look good for McCoy. A guy that I respect in the NFL community, Mike Freeman, former columnist in the New York Times, Washington Post, now with Bleacher Report. He came out yesterday and said he's heard news that McCoy basically is somehow involved in this, and it's not going to be good, not just for his football career, but possible jail time. I would compare this more to the Ray Caruth incident than even Ray Rice, because, Ray Caruth had the hitman go and kill his pregnant girlfriend with his child. So that was terrible. And, it found out that this McCoy was involved. He's got some serious issues going on. So,
and it sure does look like it. It makes a lot of sense. He had been talking to people apparently about the value of this jewelry, and man, she could get robbed for it, or just kind of. It sounds like it was a very messy breakup, and it's led down a violent path.
So it's not looking good for him. So. I would stay away completely in all drafts. If you have to draft within the next week or so before even more information comes out, I would leave them off your draft board. You can get other guys who will actually probably suit up this year. So I would stay away. But in regards to Chris Ivory, I wouldn't trust him as the Bills' handcuff, or as McCoy's handcuff, or the Bills' starting running back if McCoy is out. There's only been one running back there hasn't been actually a running back who's averaged less per carry the last 2 years than Chris Ivory. He's been dead last both years in rushing yards per carry, barely above 3. So he's aging. I don't believe really he has anything left in the tank. He has some miles on him. So he's not going to be able to produce anything that you're going to want on a fantasy roster. I agree. If the Bills don't make a move, Marcus Murphy probably is the guy that you're going to want to look at. Now, there are still some names out there. Obviously, DeMarco Murray was mentioned. You also have guys like Alfred Morris, Orleans Darkwa.
Oh, I got one, Dan. I got the solution. Ryan, you're going to love this, and Dan's going to love it too. There's a guy out there, Eddie Lacy.
Oh, God.
This is his year. No. This is the time.
Nice.
The last place Eddie Lacy needs to play is Buffalo.
Yeah.
You don't like that one, guys? What?
No. No.
He'll be eating chicken wings every night. Are you serious?
No, he turned a new page for about 3.5 weeks leading into last season, and he was ready. But just misfortunate things. So I'm still in the Eddie Lacy bandwagon. Love you, Eddie.
Is he still an RB2 for you?
Yes. If he's on Buffalo, yeah.
He's the size of two actual running backs.
Buffalo signs him, he's number 1.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyways, realistic options. So, I mean, Murray, I think, would be the best choice, but there's some other ones. But anyway, even with it, there's not a name that's going to scream valuable high pick in fantasy. So you're probably going to want to steer clear of the Bills' offense in general. Whoever suits up at quarterback, McCarron, Josh Allen, who isn't ready, he probably shouldn't start, or Nathan Peterman. But you're going to want to stay away from the Bills' offense altogether in fantasy. Don't touch anybody.
So would DeMarco probably be the best, or is DeMarco the best available free agent right now? I think Tennessee just wanted to move on. I still think he has legit gas in the tank.
Yeah, he's got some, but I wouldn't. He's not going to be a guy you're going to want to give the ball to 20 to 25 times a game anymore. I think he's more a 10 to 15 touch guy.
So there are a few other younger guys out there that may fit that category. Andre Ellington, Brandon Oliver. I don't know. Jamal Charles is one of those.
Brandon Oliver home. Brandon Oliver went to UB, Buffalo Bull. Yeah. So that would be cool, but he's not a starting running back in the NFL, but he's a nice piece that you can complement with maybe a Marcus Murphy.
At this point, you better do something, though, Buffalo, because I'm not so sure that Dan's 13th ranked running back in his fantasy running back rankings, LaShawn McCoy, is
I also have one more tidbit on LaShawn McCoy news that broke today. He did, quote-unquote, lawyer up, and the lawyer that he assigned to his case was Ray Lewis's lawyer. We all remember how that turned out.
I don't know if that's good or not. So one more thing, guys. Maybe, Dan, you know what's going on with this guy, but one of my former Memphis alums, is DeAngelo Williams just out of the league now? I've never heard him really say he's going to retire. It just he never got picked back up by the Steelers and didn't get a job last year. But I mean, he's not done if he really wants to physically play football, right?
Sorry, man. He's done. He's watched, what is it, like 34 now? He's his jersey number. That's not gonna.
The last time he was on a football field filling in for the once again suspended Le'Veon Bell, he held the torch just fine.
Yeah, he did. No, it's like, well, it's just the NFL. They just don't. It's a stigma. It's a stigma against once you hit 30, you're done. I said that about Adrian Peterson last year. I think we have a guest on who was all for Adrian Peterson, but no, yeah, he was terrible.
He had one good week for me, and that was all I needed at that time.
The next week, the L's started piling up. But yeah, DeAngelo Williams, a great guy. Loved him in his football career, but I don't think any NFL team is going to give him a chance. Go for that flag football league. That's I don't know if you guys have seen those videos, those games. Flag football.
I've seen him wrestle in TNA, and he can wrestle, man. He's no joke.
I think that's his next career pursuit.
Oh, he's wrestling? I didn't even know that.
For sure.
Yeah. He's made several appearances too. Yeah, cool. Made several appearances for an off-brand of wrestling that no one really follows, TNA. But yeah, I think that's his next career pursuit.
Does he have a ring name or a stage name, or is it just DeAngelo Williams?
DeAngelo Williams, yeah. He has a finishing move. I think it's like the Panther something.
Eye of the Tiger?
It's corny.
That would
something
be great.
like that.
Yes, the Eye of the Tiger. He was sporting a nice Memphis State jersey in the ring. His last appearance in TNA. I love it. I had to get me one of them shirts. But my man DeAngelo. All right, so that does it, guys. UFC talk, Buffalo Bills talk. What's going to happen with LaShawn McCoy? What's going to happen to the future of Brock Lesnar? Will this DC fight take place in the UFC ring and all that? Will Nick Pertins win the fantasy baseball league? And will Tyrod Taylor be able to propel Josh Gordon into a top 3 wide receiver in fantasy this coming year? So I don't know, a lot yet to be determined, but want to thank Ryan Thomas for coming on, man. I know you're excited. Great job once again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure. I always enjoy it.
Check out the Thomas Take podcast. Every day he's doing something. So check it out.
Live on YouTube. Subscribe to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast YouTube channel. These t-shirts as well are available on teespring.com/the Thomas Take Sports Podcast.
Boom, right there. Need to pick one up. Dan, what else is going on MFST besides the fantasy football guide that's had you buried for the last month?
Just the guide, and the guide. So buy the guide. It's $1, and it goes to two great causes. But other than that, yeah, the site's still bumping out info. I brought out a nice piece today about some training camp position battles of wide receivers and the fantasy impact that has. So we're still putting out content on MFST, but ultimately buy the guide.
And the Hat Trick podcast has finally been released. A couple of episodes from our man DDT, Dylan Davis Torado, of the Hat Trick podcast. So check that out on the site as well. So appreciate you for joining us again. Thanks for Ryan Thomas for joining us and talking about all that. For my co-host Dan Chalk, I'm Brandon Reed. Catch you next time, podcast peeps. Later. Peace. And